My name is Kevin Lewis, and this is my final technical presentation for software design and development. So my first enemy was a big hands boss, probably the most complicated enemy I created. This was in Sprint 3. We'll just go through his state diagram. So he gets initialized, goes into a started state. In the started state, he moves down from above the game area onto the game area. Then once he gets on the screen, he's in an appeared state. If he overlaps the player in the appeared state, then he goes into a lock state where he sets an attack, and then he waits while the hands, which are other classes connected to the big hands boss, do their thing. Then once the attack is over, he goes back to being appeared again. At any point, locked, appeared, or in waiting, if his health is gone, he's damaged and he's killed. So as a big hands boss, I want to only move horizontally at the top of the screen so that I can fire my big hands down towards the player. As a big hands boss, I want to stay within the left and right side of the screen so that I can always be seen by the player. So to do that, we initialize him at a random X on the window and then negative 200Y on the window so that he is above the window when he starts, and then we can animate him coming down into the window in a menacing boss-like fashion. He also sets two big hands, puts them on the screen in a location relative to wherever he starts. So as a big hands boss, I want to increase my speed when the player is also at the top of the screen so that I can hit him and make him stay below me. This is so the player can't just sit at the top of the screen and shoot sideways. So once it gets to the appeared state, it checks and see if the player is overlapping it vertically, and it uses a unit travel distance and a speed buff during its update. It doubles this unit travel distance and speed buff, effectively doubling the speed when it's on the top of the screen, making it very difficult for the player to not get hit when he's up there. And the speed gets, or the overlap gets checked in the update method every frame. As a big hands boss, I want to fire my hands vertically towards the bottom of the screen so I can damage the player. As a big hands boss, I want my hands to return after every time I fire them so that I can attack again. So the big hands boss has 3 attacks. We call this the smash attack, slap attack, and stretch attack. This is describing the stretch attack where the hands go from the top of the screen to the bottom. So once we the big hands are added, they're added in a location relative to the big hands boss. Then they'll be in appeared state. Once the attack is called from the big hands boss, in this case the stretch attack, it does a stretch start, goes into a stretch start state when the hands move back to give the player an indication that they're going to be shooting forward. Once they move back far enough, they go into a stretch out state, which is where they go towards the bottom of the screen. Once they hit the bottom of the screen or they hit the player, they go into a return state, in which case they go back to the location of the boss and back to appeared. So they return every time, and they're fired vertically down the screen. Similarly, as a big hands boss, I want to send my hands out to find a spot to slam down so that I can damage the player. And as a big hands boss, I want my hands to return every time I slam them so that I can attack again. This is just like the stretch attack. Slam attack goes, or I guess we're calling it a smash attack. Goes over here. Once the attack is called, it goes into a smash move. So the hands go to 2 different positions on the screen. The left hand picks a random spot on the screen. The right hand picks a random spot on the screen, and they travel to those spots. Once they both get into the correct position, they go into a smash up state, which makes the hands bigger on the screen, which makes it look like they're coming up towards the player. Gives them an indication that they're going to smash down. Once they're animated up, they smash down. So they get smaller until they hit the ground. Once they hit the ground in an animation down, then it puts a wave onto the screen. So we'll see that here in another slide. But if the attack is completely over or the player gets hit, then we go into the return state and they go back to the boss. So here's the wave. As a big hands boss, I want to slam and send a shockwave around my hands so that my area of effect is increased. So on the smash or slam attack, there is a sprite sheet that shows this here as a shockwave. So we have a list of the images in this, and then we have a specific buffered image smash that gets rendered, and then we have a frame count. So once the hands are animated down into the smash, then we add this image onto the screen, and we pick each one of these based on 1 frame up to 25 frames. So each one of these is done 1 time, 25 frames all the way through, and then this image is taken off the screen. And the collision box as well is added for each one of these, so the area of effect is increased from the size of the hands to the size of this shockwave. As a big hands boss, I want to spread my hands so that I can swing them towards the player. And as a big hands boss, I want to swing the hands in an arc towards the player so that I can damage him. As a big hands boss, I want my hands to return every time I slap them so that I can attack again. So this is the slap attack. This one is the most complicated. So we start with the hands in front of the boss here. When the attack is called, the slap attack, we do a slap back, which the hands move out in an arcing fashion this way, slowly, so the player has an indication that they're going to come towards him. Once they move back all the way, we do a slap forward, so they'll come in a fashion a little bit quicker this way until they hit each other, or they hit the player, then they return to the big hands boss enemy. So we used trigonometry to do this. We picked a spot that we wanted to rotate around, and we had an angle and a radius, so I increased the radius and kept the angle the same as it's moving, so it moves out away from the boss, and then make the radius come back in for that, and same thing with the hands going this way. As a big hands boss, I want to attack when I am horizontally aligned with the player so that my attacks have the best chance of damaging him. So in the appeared state, after the boss is on the screen, we have the boss's X value and the main.gamedata.shooter X value, which is the player value. And in the update, every time a frame is done, an update is called, we check for an overlap with the player. If it overlaps, we go into the lock state and we start an attack. So every time it overlaps horizontally, we start an attack. As a big hands boss, I want to switch between my 3 attacks so the player cannot predict them. So this is how the attacks look. I have it set if the big hands boss X value is within the first third of the screen, he can only do the stretch or slam attacks. If he's in the middle of the screen, then he has space for his hands to move outwards without leaving the screen, so he can do all 3 attacks. And then if he's in the last third of the screen, he'll only do the stretch or slam attacks. These are chosen at random, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2 on the outsides. As a big hands boss, I want to return my hands every time they make contact during attack so that I can attack again. So at any point during any of these attacks, if the player is hit anywhere on any of the states, it automatically goes into return and moves back to the boss so that it doesn't look like the hands are going through the player. As a splitter enemy, I want to always move towards the player so that I damage him. So the idea of the splitter enemy is that he starts as one big enemy and he splits into 2 smaller enemies, which then split into 2 smaller enemies, and their speed increases each time. So we use trigonometry this way. We have the location here. This is the location of the player minus that location X, location of the player Y minus the splitter location Y. We use these trigonometry formulas and set a movement dx dy, speed of the splitter enemy times the angle we get, and in that case, since it's updated every frame, it will always follow the movements of the player. As a splitter enemy, I want to move slowly relative to the player so that I do not overpower him. As a splitter enemy, I want to increase my speed on every split so that I can continue attacking the player. As a splitter enemy, I want to increase my speed slightly so that I do not become too fast. Okay, so when we initialize here, we call this a split level 0, which means it has not split at all. If it's a split level 1 or 2, that means it's already split either once or twice. So after initialization, the splitter enemy goes into a chasing state. Once its health is gone and it's been split twice, it's damaged and it's done. Otherwise, if the health is gone and it's only one of the first 2 splits, then it goes into a splitting state where it creates a new splitter with an increased split level. That splitter then goes into a separating state where it moves apart from its brother, and then once it's done moving apart, it goes into its own chasing state. So once we're in the chasing state, there's a unit travel distance and a frame count. So as the frames go up, the splitter enemy only moves on certain frames to keep its speed slow relative to the player. So for split level 0, the frame count mod 30 is greater than 18 are the frames when it moves, so that's only 11 out of 30 frames. Once it splits once, a frame count mod 20 greater than 10, so 9 out of 20 frames is how many frames it will move. And then after the second split, frame count mod 10 is greater than 4, so 5 out of 10 frames it will be moving. So it increases its speed each time, but not by modifying the unit travel distance value, but modifying the times, these frames on which it moves. So we did increase every split, and we increased it slightly so it doesn't become too fast, and also it's slow relative to the player. As a splitter enemy, I want to split into 2 smaller enemies when my health is low so that I can continue to attack. As a splitter enemy, I want to die after splitting twice so that I am fair to the player. So like I said before, split level 0 is where it starts. It goes into the chasing state. If the health is gone and it's split level 0 or 1, it goes into a splitting state, creates a new splitter, 2 new splitters technically, and it initializes them with a split level 1 higher than the current split level. Those will separate apart from each other and go into their own chasing states. If at any point the split level becomes 2 and the health is gone, it's damaged and it goes away. As a trailer enemy, I want to always be moving so that I can leave a constant trail. As a trailer enemy, I want to move to random locations on the screen so that my trail cannot be predicted. So the idea of the trailer enemy is one, to slow the enemy by leaving a trail behind him. It doesn't do any actual damage, it just slows the enemy with an area of effect. So trailer enemy states are simple. It gets initialized to a random area on the screen, goes into a moving state. It stays in that moving state constantly unless its health is gone, in which case it's damaged, and then it's done. So in the moving state, we start by checking if the trailer enemy is moving. When it's first initialized, it's not. So it says no. It creates a random destination somewhere on the screen and sets the moving value to true. We go back to moving again. The value is now true. It says, are we at the destination? If we're not, no. Then we create a trail. Then we move towards the destination. Back to here. We keep doing this until at one point we'll reach our destination. Yes, we'll set moving equals false. Then once we come up here, we create a new random destination and go through it again. Should note this create trail is only done on a certain frame count, so it doesn't create a trail once each frame. It creates it every certain number of frames. As we can see, it's always moving except for a single frame where we set moving to false, but that's unseeable by the player, and it also moves to random locations every time it sets a destination. As a trailer enemy, I want to continuously leave a trail as I move so that I can cover the most area. So we've gone over this. Once we are moving in the moving state and we haven't reached our destination, we're going to create a trail. The only non-continuous creation of the trail is this single frame where we come to the destination, we set moving equals false on that call of update, and then we start moving again. Other than that, we're setting a trail every continuous number of frames. As a trailer enemy, I want my trail to slow the enemy when he touches it so that he can be more easily attacked. So this right here is describing the trail itself. So the trail is initialized. Its update method is called. In the update method, if our frame count is over 240 and we're doing 40 frames a second, so that's over. If 6 seconds have passed, it will start fading out, and then for another third of a second, it will fade out and then it will disappear. So what happens here is if it's under its fading out status, then we will check the collision with the shooter. So we'll do a pixel collision check to see if the shooter is touching that particular trail. If it is, we'll check and see if the shooter is already slowed. If he is already slowed, then we don't do anything. We don't need to because he's in contact and he's already slowed. If he is not already slowed, even though it's collided, we'll set him slowed. So we'll go back up here. If it's not collided, we also want to check and see if he's slowed, because if he is already slowed but he's not collided, then that means that he's left the area of effect and we need to set him to unslowed. If he's already slowed when we're collided and it's check slowed and it's no, then that means we don't need to do anything because we're not collided and he's not slowed. So as you can see, the shooter enemy is slowed every time he touches it, and then immediately unslowed every time he leaves the area of effect. As a trailer enemy, I want to leave a blob on death so that I can slow the player even after death, and then as a trailer enemy, I want to leave a death blob that is much larger than my trail so that I have a better chance of slowing the player. So in reality, the state diagram for the trailer enemy looks like this. Similar to the last one, except for when it goes into the damage state, it does its explosion animation, and right before going into a done state, we set a final trail blob on the screen. This trail blob is a separate image which has twice the radius of the normal trail blob. It sets it on the screen once, and it functions just like the previous trail. For 6 seconds it'll be on the screen, then it will fade out and disappear. And that's it.